विदेश मंत्रालय एक प्रेस कॉन्फ्रेंस कर रहा है, वहां लिए चलता हूं।
Following the developments over the last few days, so today we have had the privilege of having with us Foreign Secretary Shri Harshvardhan Shringla to talk to us about our primary focus of the government today, which is on the safety and security of the Indian nationals and their evacuation from Ukraine. I will request Foreign Secretary Sir to make few brief opening remarks, and after that we'll take some questions. So over to you, sir.
Namaskar and good evening. Thank you for joining us at this late hour. You have all seen the sudden and serious developments in Ukraine today. As we speak, there is a meeting of the Cabinet Committee on Security, chaired by the Prime Minister in session, to take stock of this situation. Prime Minister has conveyed at the CCS meeting that the topmost priority of the government is the safety and security of Indian nationals, including Indian students, and their evacuation from Ukraine. Prime Minister is scheduled to speak to the President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, shortly. External Affairs Minister will be speaking to the foreign ministers of the countries neighboring Ukraine, namely Poland, Romania, Slovakia, and Hungary. Earlier this evening, he also spoke to the EU High Representative as well as the Foreign Minister of the UK. A number of steps have been taken over the last month or so to deal with the emerging situation in Ukraine, including the contingencies that could arise, and I'm referring to the situation as we see today. We started the registration of Indian nationals in the Ukraine about a month ago. Our embassy anticipated the need to connect and be in contact with all Indian students in the Ukraine. Based on the online registration process that was conducted by our embassy, we found that there were close to about 20,000 Indian nationals, including students in the Ukraine. Of these, about 4,000 have since left the country. We have taken a number of measures to facilitate flights out of the country. This includes removing the cap on the number of passengers that could fly out of Ukraine that was imposed by the civil aviation authorities of both countries. There was a 440 numbers that could fly out every week. That cap was removed. We also ensured that the number of flights were augmented rapidly from about twice a week to about 2 flights a day. And that enabled us to get at least 4,000 of our citizens and students out. We should also remember that there were a number of other options available through flights to Dubai and Istanbul and other places from Kyiv. Our embassy in Ukraine continues to be functional, is rendering all assistance possible to Indian nationals there, notwithstanding the fairly complicated and evolving situation that we find ourselves in. The embassy has issued a number of advisories in recent days. Today itself, the embassy has issued 3 advisories, and these provide advice to Indian nationals on the situation as it evolves, travel towards safer places, including western parts of the country that will facilitate the exit by road and other means, safety precautions that our citizens could take, etc. Our ambassador has also sent a personal message to all Indian citizens in Ukraine, providing advice. We are consulting universities, student contractors in the process of providing for the welfare and safety of our students. A control room has been set up in MEA. Now this control room has been functional for the past 7 or 8 days, but we have seriously augmented the strength. We have over 20 officers that are manning these control rooms, this control room in the Ministry of External Affairs on a 24/7 basis. Just to give an example, till now and just today, we have answered 980 calls and dealt with some 850 emails that were sent to this control room. Our embassy in Kiev has also set up a helpline, 24/7 helpline center. The other measure that we have taken is that we have dispatched Russian-speaking officers to Kiev and to the countries neighboring Ukraine. Russian-speaking because the language there is Russian. If you're not Russian-speaking, your utility is far more limited. Some of these officers are already reached and are functioning. Some will be reaching shortly. We've also asked our embassies, our ambassadors in the countries neighboring Ukraine, and I mentioned these, Poland, Romania, Slovakia and Hungary, to send teams of their officers to the border areas with Ukraine to facilitate the exit of Indian nationals from Ukraine, to permit them to come into their countries, so where they can be safely evacuated back to India. And MEA teams are on their way as we speak to Zahoni border post in Hungary, Krakwiecz land border in Poland, Visny Nemke in Slovak Republic, and Suceava land border in Romania. We have also asked some of our officers to go across and set up camp offices in Ukraine close to the border. Two of the places we have identified are Lviv, which is close to Poland, and Chernivtsi, which is close to Romania. And here I think will be sort of facilitation points. Now our embassy has, it's a very complicated, very evolving situation. It's obviously, certain areas there's conflict. We can't have a single sort of advisory that fits all situations. We have to evolve. We have to see where we are and how and which part of the country are located and what the situation is. Generally, if we are advising that if you find yourself in a certain difficult situation, then you should remain in secure areas and shelters, etc. If you can, you move westwards towards the borders with some of the countries I mentioned. And these advisories will be continuously issued. These helplines are for that purpose, so that depending on the situation, that advice can be given. One important step that we have taken, because a number of our students were reluctant to leave because the authorities, university authorities had said that the classes must be offline. We have now persuaded all the universities and institutions to allow online classes, and therefore students can actually leave without having to face the strain of not being able to or missing out on their classes. As I said, the situation on the ground is difficult and is rapidly evolving. I want to take this opportunity to assure all Indian citizens, including students in Ukraine and their family members, that we will take all possible steps to bring you back safe and sound, bring your wards back safe and sound. Prime Minister has specifically stated that the Ministry of External Affairs should do everything possible in coordination, of course, with other ministries involved, to ensure that facilitation on the lines that I discussed, helplines, control rooms, officers available, shelters, accommodation, facilitation in every manner is done for our citizens. We, of course, had a few citizens outside our embassy also. I'm told that at least all of them, I'm talking about numbers of 200 to 250 of our citizens, have been accommodated in schools in the area. The embassy has been asked to facilitate their requirements, and depending on the situation, we will have them evacuated westwards. As you know, this government has been very focused when it comes to the welfare of Indian citizens in difficult situations around the world. We have had a lot of experience in facilitating and arranging such evacuations. The Vande Bharat mission, which is the largest repatriation exercise of its kind, was undertaken during the peak of COVID times. More recently, we had Op Devi Shakti, which is involving the evacuation of Indian nationals from Afghanistan, from a conflict situation. We will obviously have to take into account that every situation presents its own challenges, and we have to deal with it accordingly. So perhaps I'll stop here and see if there are any questions.
Thank you very much. I'm sure there are a lot of questions. Please introduce yourselves before taking the questions. Maybe I'll start with you right here. I saw your hand go first, and then we'll.
Sir, I'm Akhilesh Suman from Sansad TV. Russia and US both are our strategic partners, and in this point of time, are we playing any role talking to both US and Russia to stop the war and create a situation when there can be a congenial atmosphere in the region?
Take a few more. A couple of more. Yeah, please. Come back.
So would you like to make any comments on the sanctions being imposed on Russia? Does that bring more difficulty for us as far as our military acquisitions are concerned? Thank you. Nanima from Ukraine.
My question is regarding India's consistent position when it comes to countries' territorial sovereignty regarding this invasion. A country's territorial sovereignty is being violated. What does New Delhi has to say on that? I'm Siddhant from Beyond.
And you, yeah, fourth.
Meghna from DD News. Sir, some states have also set up control rooms. So is the MEA coordinating with the state control rooms as well? Where do those people who reach out to state control rooms, does it reach the MEA? How does it work?
I'll take one last one. Okay. I'll come back to it.
So Hasini Heather from the Hindu. Foreign Secretary, we know that, as you said, there have been conversations between the EAM, the European Union counterparts, the UK as well. I wanted to just touch on Nanima and Siddhant's questions on the UN Security Council resolution that the US says it is going to bring. Has India seen a draft of the resolution that is coming about? So far, India has the statements India has made have not criticized Russia, have referred to legitimate security interests of all parties, and has not actually affirmed the territorial integrity of Ukraine. So I just wanted to know if India's position on any of these is likely to change given this UNSC resolution.
So let us start with Akhilesh's question, which is, whether we are playing any role with our strategic partners. It is true that India has maintained the best of relations with all countries concerned, whether it's the United States, whether it's Russia, or whether it's the European Union. We have been in touch with all parties concerned, as you can imagine, both as a member of the Security Council, as a country with a lot at stake in that region, as a country with so many of its citizens in a vulnerable zone. We have been in close touch with all concerned. External Affairs Minister was in Europe recently, where he's had a number of meetings with his interlocutors. This evening, as I said, Prime Minister will be speaking to President Putin. External Affairs Minister himself has spoken to a number of ministers from the European Union, and will be speaking to those ministers, those of his counterparts who are from neighboring countries, which is very important, primarily for our own citizens and their safe evacuation out of Ukraine. So our focus in the UN Security Council has always been on de-escalation of tensions, on diplomatic dialogue as the only way forward, and we've also emphasized on the existing agreements, the Minsk agreements, the Normandy format. We've also obviously placed the highest importance to the safety and security of our nationals in the Ukraine in our statements in the UN Security Council. And so in all of this, I think we have, as I said, maintained that people need to talk to each other, the parties need to be engaged, and if there's anything that we can do to facilitate that engagement, we are more than happy to do. And I think, as we go along, we will try and be as helpful as possible. Nayanima's question on sanctions on Russia, you're aware that certain unilateral sanctions were already existing as far as Russia was concerned. Some additional sanctions have been imposed by the United States, by the EU, by Australia, Japan, the UK, among others. But this is an evolving situation, as I said, and we have to see what sort of impact these sanctions will have on our own interests. Clearly, we need to study this carefully, because any sanctions will have impact on our existing relationship. I think it would only be correct to acknowledge that factor, but the actual impact of the sanctions needs to be studied carefully, and we will do that. Siddhant, I think you spoke about the country's sovereignty. I think that question was also asked by Suhasini when you talked about our position in the Security Council. the possibility of a UNSC resolution that would be tabled on the evolving situation. We have seen a draft resolution. I'm told that that would undergo considerable changes. We will wait to see the shape that this resolution takes before we can pronounce ourselves in the position that we would take on this issue. So it is, as I said, an evolving situation both on the ground and in the United Nations. We are at the cutting edge of many of the issues, many of the areas where these issues will be discussed and will be considered by the international community, and we will certainly play our due role in that regard.
The state